All right, now my mic is on. Got sound. I think those on the video can hear me. They'll be trickling in here for the next minute or so. Welcome to you watching from afar, and once again, welcome to you who are here in person. I was saying it seems like we haven't seen each other all year, and that it actually is technically true. But it is really great to be able to be together. Let me ask, how are you guys doing? Some of you have been doing hybrid school, and some of you in Rochester haven't been in school at all for a class. So give me a thumbs up if you're liking where you're at. Give me a thumbs up. Okay, all right. Some of you give me, if you're not, okay. All right, just give me a thumb, and if it's good, give me a thumbs up. If it's bad, give me a thumbs down. If it's middle, give me a thumbs, 2 thumbs down. All right, seeing a diversity of answers here. Some of you are enjoying this, some of you are not. I can tell you that my kindergartner, Josiah, who hasn't been to school for a full week yet this year, already is hoping for a snow day tomorrow. And they're just barely back to school in the elementary ages here in Rochester, so I know where he's at. Though his brother Rafe is quite excited to be at school, so it is for you. Some of you want to be there, some of you are okay being at home, but I bet you all want to see your friends and hang out with people. So I'm glad that we can be here, at least for a little bit, with our small groups and with our large group. And we're going to get rolling. We have made it this week all the way through the Old Testament. Can you believe that? All of those crazy stories from creation to the destruction of the temple. And now we've made it to the New Testament and to Christmas. So you're going to have to rewind your seasonal calendar just a little bit, because today is Christmas in the story. But how did we get here? We have a pretty lengthy video today, actually, with a lot of review of the whole Old Testament and the story of Christ's birth. So I'm going to devote a fair amount of time to that. But I did want to go through this because this ties in to Christmas. The very first verses of the Bible in Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that it was good. Awesome. And God saw that it was good. That was our first chapter. Our second was God making a promise. "I will make you, Abraham, into a great nation and bless you. And all the people on the earth will be blessed through you." And how does this happen? This all points to where we're headed today. Chapter 3, now we won't go through all of them. Joseph says to his brothers, "You intended what you did for harm, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." This also is pointing to where we're headed today. And skipping to chapter 11, this was about David, the greatest king in Israel. God makes a promise to David and says, "I will raise up offspring to succeed you, one of your own sons. I will establish his kingdom. I will be his father. He will be my son. I will set him over my house and my kingdom forever. His throne will be established forever." And this points to where we're headed today. The whole Old Testament is pointing now to where we're headed today, to the birth of Jesus. And so we're going to spend a little time with a video. There's, as I said, it's about a 5-minute review, so you can kind of track with where we've been. If you ever look in your story, I'm going to hold it up for the camera. If you ever look in your story, there's good review here as well from the table of contents. It goes as a timeline to some of the subtitles on the side of the page, tell you about where we're at. And today we go from a nation in decline to Jesus. We'll see how we get there.
In the beginning, God created the universe and a planet called Earth. Humans were formed in God's image to continue God's work. But soon, humans decided we want to live our way, not God's. Selfishness and violence filled the world, so God started over with just one family. And God made a covenant with a man named Abraham. "The land around you is now yours. Your family will be my blessing to the entire world." In just a few generations, they grew into a large nation named Israel. The Egyptians became fearful and forced the Israelites to be their slaves. Through a humble leader named Moses, God led the Israelites in a great exodus back toward their promised land. Along the journey, God gave laws and commands to help the Israelites follow God's ways. Finally, after 40 years of struggle and complaining in the desert, the Israelites arrived back home in the promised land. In victory, the people worshiped God, but soon after, they turned from God and lived their own rebellious ways. This became a pattern from generation to generation. Israel's greatest judge was Samuel. He followed God's ways and spoke for God as a prophet. He told Israel that God was the only king they ever needed. But they desired to be like the corrupt nations surrounding them and insisted, "We want a human king who we can see to rule over us just like the other nations." So Samuel found a man named Saul to be Israel's first king. His reign began well, but before long, Saul stopped following God's ways and made many bad decisions. So Samuel told Saul, "Because you have turned your back on God, God has rejected you as a king." Samuel's search for the next king led to a courageous young shepherd boy named David. When David grew up to be king, God blessed him and the Israelites greatly. But David was not perfect. He had an affair with a married woman and committed a murder to cover it up. But deep inside, David always loved God and would return to living in God's ways. Known as the poet warrior, he wrote music to God called psalms, heartfelt expressions of prayer, struggle, and thankfulness. After many years as king, David gave the throne to his son Solomon. God also told David, "One day, one of your descendants will rule with a kingdom that will never end." Solomon succeeded his father David, becoming the richest king in Israel's history. Full of God's wisdom, Solomon wrote books like Proverbs and built a magnificent temple, a permanent tabernacle reminding people of God's continual presence. But Solomon strayed from God, marrying corrupt wives who led him into worshiping false gods. Civil war broke out, dividing the country into a northern kingdom called Israel and a southern kingdom called Judah. Soon, both of these kingdoms were led by corrupt kings who ignored God's ways. During this time, prophets were sent as messengers, calling the Israelites to return to God. They warned of the destructive consequences ahead. The prophet Elijah, a wild and rugged man, showed up false prophets by calling on God to give an awesome display of fire. The prophet Elisha followed him, bringing a boy back to life by causing him to sneeze. These prophets challenged the Israelites and their kings to return to God's better ways. But the Israelites would not listen. Distracted in their own rebellion, other nations swept in and conquered both of the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. God's people were forced out of the promised land, and many were taken away to be slaves once again. The temple was destroyed, and the people lost everything. This was a time called the exile, where many of the Israelites, now called Jews, were scattered across different lands. One prophet named Daniel was sent to a city named Babylon. The law demanded that everyone pray only to the king of Babylon, but Daniel refused and prayed to God 3 times a day. So Daniel was thrown into a pit of hungry lions. But God closed the mouths of the lions, and Daniel emerged the next morning without a scratch. Though scattered, God was still watching over the Jewish people, and God gave them hope, speaking through the prophet Jeremiah's words. "I'll make a new covenant with the people of Israel, returning them to the promised land and filling their hearts and minds with my ways." 60 years later, this hope was realized. The Persian Empire freed the Jewish people to return to their promised land. A small number gathered back in the capital city of Jerusalem, and a new, smaller temple was built under the leadership of Ezra. Reunited, they celebrated and shouted with joy. But the elders wept in remembrance of what was lost. Prophets like Malachi and Isaiah pointed to the future and a coming king, a Messiah, one who would fully restore Israel and bring a new kingdom of peace. So the Jewish people waited and hoped, and God would not speak through the prophets again for 400 years.
It had been 400 years since God had spoken directly to the Israelites. Then, one day, God sent an angel to a girl named Mary, who was engaged to a man named Joseph. The angel told Mary that she would soon become pregnant and give birth to a son named Jesus. God would give him the throne of his ancestor David, and his kingdom would never end. But Mary was a virgin, and this confused her. So the angel told her it would be by God's power that she became pregnant. When Mary's fiancé Joseph heard about this, he decided he would quietly end the engagement. But an angel visited Joseph as well, telling him not to be afraid, and that Jesus would save people from their sins. So Joseph and Mary decided to get married. Soon after, they traveled to the town of Bethlehem. Because so many other people were in town, there was no place for them to stay. While they were there, Mary gave birth to her son, wrapped him in cloths, and laid him in the manger. There were shepherds living in the fields nearby. While they were watching their sheep, an angel appeared to them, announcing that a boy had been born in Bethlehem. This boy, said the angel, was the Messiah, the king that the Israelites had been waiting for. So the shepherds left their sheep and raced to Bethlehem, finding Mary and Joseph and Jesus. The shepherds praised God for their new king. During this time, the country of Rome controlled all of Israel. After hearing about Jesus' birth, a group of magicians and astrologers came to Herod, a governor working for the Roman Empire. They claimed that they had seen a star in the sky, telling them that the king of the Israelites, now called Jews, had been born. This news really upset Herod. When they arrived in Bethlehem and met Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, they felt great joy. Herod was furious and commanded that all boys in Bethlehem who were 2 years old and younger be killed. But God had already warned Joseph, who by that time had moved his family to Egypt to hide. Later, after King Herod died, Joseph, Mary, and Jesus moved back to Israel, to a small town named Nazareth. They stayed in Nazareth for years, raising Jesus. When he was 12, they traveled to Jerusalem for a festival. When the festival ended, Joseph and Mary left for home with a large group of people, but Jesus stayed behind without them knowing. When they realized he was missing, they went back to Jerusalem and found Jesus sitting in the temple, listening to the teachers and asking them questions. His parents were upset and couldn't understand why he had stayed behind. Jesus told them, "Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" Joseph and Mary didn't know what he meant. They did not yet fully understand the importance of who Jesus was and all he would do.
All right, so that was a long video, but it had a lot to say. It showed how all of the Old Testament is pointing to Jesus. And now we are here at Christmas Day, so I want to say Merry Christmas. All right, thank you. Merry Christmas to you as well. This is the day of Christmas. This is the day that Jesus is born in our story, that is. And why is this such an important day? We all know Christmas is an important day. Why do you think it's important? Yeah, it's the day that Jesus came into the world. Any other answers? Yeah, so you said our King, you said Jesus. Both are correct. That's exactly right. Jesus is your Lord because you've been baptized into this truth. But what does this mean for us? Why is this a big deal? Well, I want to ask you about this last year. How has the last year been? Has it been a year full of justice? What do you think? It's been kind of up and down. No matter what the news storyline that you've maybe followed or not, you might wonder if it's been a year full of justice or not. There's actually a lot of people that have been angry and sad and afraid over the last year. Of course, this is probably always the case in this world. But when we think of this last year, it's been a tough one. Jesus was born into a world of sin. So Jesus, God's own Son, was born under the law. That means that he was born underneath the weight of all this injustice. And not only the past year, but every single year in the history of the world. Jesus was born under that weight. That's why this is important. But he was not defeated by this. He actually brought victory and peace to us. That's why this is important. So I want to show you a key verse from our story. And when you take a look at chapter 22, you're going to find portions from the Gospel of John, from the Gospel of Matthew, and from the Gospel of Luke. Matthew and Luke tell about the Christmas story. John starts differently. John says, the Word, that is Jesus, became flesh and dwelt among us. For while the law was given through Moses, that tells us what to do, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. This is why Christmas is such a big deal. Not just that grace and truth came, but grace and truth have come for you, so that you may have grace, even in a world full of injustice, so that you may know the truth, and so that you may have peace and salvation. We don't have a lot of time tonight, and I need to run up to our communion service, but I wanted to, normally we'd sing this together, but I'm a little nervous about inviting you to sing, trying to reduce our breath going all over the room, but I'll invite you to hum in your masks. And at home, you can, of course, sing, if you would like, a song that we sing every Christmas Eve at Bethel, and most churches do. And you maybe can imagine, if you've been here for a candlelight service on the 24th of December, everyone has a candle in church, and we sing this song in the darkness of the sanctuary. It's a beautiful song written by Franz Gruber, who was an organist in Germany, and the organ broke that Christmas Eve, and so he had to quickly write this song and played it on guitar. And I don't know how well this is being picked up, but it will, we'll give it a shot. So hum along, read the words, sing the words in your heart, and imagine, here is Christ, who's come to take away all injustice, including your own. And he is yours now. This is why Christmas is important. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round yon virgin mother and child, holy infant so tender and mild, sleep in heavenly peace, sleep in heavenly peace. Silent night, holy night, shepherds quake at the sight, glory stream from heaven afar, heavenly hosts sing hallelujah, Christ the Savior is born, Christ the Savior is born. Here's the third verse telling the story of Christ's birth. It brings you right back to Christmas. And we'll end with this verse, and this will be our opening and closing prayer. So sing, hum along, sing in your hearts. Silent night, holy night, Son of God, love's pure light, radiant beams from your holy face, with the dawn of redeeming grace. Jesus, Lord, at your birth, Jesus, Lord, at your birth. So we get to chapter 22, and we have some questions. What's going on in the world with Jesus' birth then and today? What was God doing with this birth? And did Jesus bring peace? What do you think? God was sending Jesus to start a kingdom that was what? That would survive forever. That's right. A kingdom forever. That's quite right. And what does Jesus' birth mean for us today? Well, you have small groups to talk more about these questions and others. I'm going to hand it off, I think, to Julie, who has a few things to share, perhaps still with our small groups. So great to be with you tonight. Merry Christmas to you all. Thank you. And pretty soon will be an Ash Wednesday in just a couple weeks.
There we go. Thanks, Pastor Jason. What a beautiful song to do today. Well, I wanted to you set me up wonderfully. I wanted to share something with you real quick. If I've got enough hands, let's see. All right. I know you're not going to be able to read what's on here, but last week we were on a chapter about rebuilding the walls. And it was all about God's promises to the Israelites, and it was about God's forgiveness. And at the end, when you did small group, we asked you to think about bricks in your life. And we asked if you would make a brick with some of your worries, fears, sins, shortcomings, and really think about giving those up to God. Because just as Pastor Jason said, God sends his Son to take away the injustice and to bring us grace and forgiveness, right? So I just wanted to share because some of you emailed me your bricks. Some of you brought them in and dropped them off for me. And so I wanted to share what is weighing on your minds because we're never alone. We all have these feelings. And sometimes to hear about what some of your peers put on their bricks can be soothing, relieving, and also can help you to not feel alone, right? So on some of these bricks, we've got some things that I think you can relate with. This one talks about distance learning being a heavy brick in this student's life, and homework, and getting good grades, and staying healthy. Another brick says COVID-19, just keeping good hygiene. That can be hard when you don't have to go to school ever, right? Does anybody have parents who are saying, did you shower today? How many days has it been since you brushed your teeth, right? Responsibilities on one of the bricks. Helping siblings out, being kind to siblings. One brick just has big pictures of COVID on it. And it says COVID, COVID, COVID. That's been the heaviest brick in this student's life. Another brick says school, wearing masks, crazy weeks, missing friends. One has great artwork on here, and it says, being apart from my friends, not making time for God, keeping up with schoolwork, getting up early, being too tall. Lots of things that I'm sure other people feel. This one says, overwhelmed, terrified, sad, broken, scared. Another one, Zoom is on here. How many of you love Zoom? Nobody's raising their hands. Kari Tellefson does. Procrastination, evil thoughts, disrespect, laziness, selfishness, unfaithful, unloving. Well, our chapter tonight brings you the good news. It brings you the good news of Jesus and forgiveness and grace. So I want to leave you with that. That's why there's a big red heart in the middle, and it says Jesus. I want you to really hold that in your heart and rest in the peace of his love and grace. Have fun in your small groups. We can go ahead and sign off, John.